Good day, everyone. Welcome to Global Government News. Today is August 23rd, 2010, and I'm Darko. This is going to be eugenics, all about eugenics, because there's too many people on the earth, and they're bad for the earth. They're bad for the planet. We're killing the planet, and so we must eradicate the humans. No, I don't believe this, of course. This is the elite's perspective, and it's a religion for them, so this is why I cover it. We're all impacted by it, whether we know it or not, directly or indirectly, whether we go to war or we eat the GMO food, artificial sweeteners, drink tap water, whatever. We're outside, letting little nanofiber particles get into our skin and our bloodstream. We're all affected by it. So this first article up is naturalnews.com, and it's titled, "Scientists Discover That Radiation Causes Breast Cancer." Gee, really? This is actually from August 18th. Been meaning to cover it. It says girls who undergo chest radiation as a cancer treatment are significantly more likely to develop breast cancer as little as 8 years later, according to a study conducted by researchers from Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York. And it says risk in women treated before puberty is not lower than those treated during adolescence, as suggested by some early studies. It says here researchers reviewed the results of 12 prior studies that looked at breast cancer risk in female survivors of childhood cancers. Patients who have undergone chest radiation as children suffer from an increased risk of breast cancer as little as 8 years old. Said the incidence is similar to that in women with a BRCA gene mutation, researchers wrote. And this is important right here because there was just research or findings that came out. They basically said, women in the U.S. or just women in general are getting way too many mammograms, and it's actually causing them to get cancer. And then you go to this paragraph here. It says a children's oncology group, of which the researchers are a part of, recommends that because of the risk, female survivors of childhood cancers get annual mammograms starting at age 25 or 8 years after the end of the radiation therapy, whichever comes later. And then here we go down here. This is what I was talking about. The source, due to concern over false positives and radiation risks, the U.S. Preventive Services Task Force no longer recommends annual mammograms. It recommends biannual tests for women over the age of 49. And yeah, I have a bunch of articles here that are kind of interesting. This next one is from LA Times. It's titled, "Government to Overhaul Bioterror and Pandemic Flu Plans. Federal officials will use H1N1 funding to speed the process of discovering and developing drugs and vaccines in case of emergency." Acknowledging that the development of medical countermeasures against bioterrorism threats and pandemic flu is lagging, federal authorities Thursday announced a $1.9 billion makeover of the system for identifying and manufacturing drugs and vaccines for public health emergencies. The overhaul includes refinements to manufacturing aimed at shaving weeks off the time it takes to produce pandemic flu vaccines, and a series of steps aimed at more quickly spotting promising scientific discoveries and getting them to the market. It says we aren't generating enough new products. Like that, Health and Human Services Secretary Kathleen Sebelius said, enough new products, enough new eugenics. It says leaks, choke points, and dead ends in the medical development pipeline. It says money for the changes come from funds initially allocated for the H1N1 flu pandemic. So it says, and a lot of people ended up not taking that vaccine, and they didn't die. It says, among other things, the effort would provide $822 million for upgrades to speed up production of pandemic flu vaccines. Another large block, $678 million, would be used to set up at least one private facility that would work under government contract with small companies to manufacture new products, develop new manufacturing processes, and help produce vaccines during periods of peak demand. And I'm sure that they'll cite, last year about, there was not enough vaccines when they needed it, and then when they finally got them all, most of the people didn't even want to take them to begin with, but they kept ramping up the fear and the propaganda to take the vaccine. But this isn't good, of course, because in a flu pandemic and a real national emergency is declared, they can pretty much force you to take a vaccine whether you want it or not, or you'll be quarantined. But it's never, a good thing when you hear this, when they're putting, billions of dollars towards speeding up, the processing of vaccines, which, according to our buddy Bill Gates, is one of three or actually it's one of his favorite forms of calling the population in order to, help combat climate change. And this is from LouRockwell.com, but it's actually from Mercola, and it's titled "Flu Plan Scandal Ahead, an Urgent Warning." I recommend you come reading this yourself. I'm just going to read a few paragraphs here, but I want to move on to the other articles. It says Barbara Lowe Fisher, founder of the National Vaccine Information Center, discusses the outcome of last year's swine flu debacle and the potential harmful changes that are being made to this season's flu vaccine as a result. One of them is they're combining the regular flu vaccine with the pandemic vaccine. It says Dr. Mercola's comments. The World Health Organization, or the WHO, declared the swine flu pandemic officially over on August 9th. The swine flu, which we were warned would kill millions, if not tens of thousands of people, turned out to be a complete dud as far as pandemics go, but health agencies and governments around the world still managed to create massive fear of this hybrid flu virus. That's right. Many scientists were saying that it was actually the way it was well, basically, they were saying it looked as if it was created in a lab. So, and of course, vaccine makers made millions off their novel H1N1 vaccines. That was by taxpayers, and a lot of the vaccines went unused. Like I said, for those in the southern hemisphere, like Australia, the flu season has already begun, and the health hazards of this year's seasonal trivalent vaccine have already become evident. For the rest of you, the flu season is nearing, and another round of advertisements for flu vaccines are about to hit the media. And she goes through the summary of a failed pandemic, saying last year the U.S. contracted for the manufacturing of over 170 million doses of swine flu vaccines, and saying that probably the most significant accomplishment of this website was that we were able to contribute to the fact that only 90 million doses were used in the U.S. It says, armed with the facts, less than 1/3 of the population fell for the fear-mongering. So there you go. This is the last paragraph I'll read. Key WHO pandemic advisors had financial ties to vaccine makers. This was perhaps suspected, but when the World Health Organization finally released a list of its pandemic advisors, it finally confirmed that at least 5 of its key players who influenced the Phase 6 pandemic declaration indeed had financial ties to vaccine makers. As we know, our tax dollars were completely wasted on these non-essential pandemic vaccines, and it appears as though financial conflicts of interest between WHO pandemic advisors and the industry may have had a great deal to do with it. This next article is titled Minister Calls for Thorough Examination of Possible Link Between H1N1 and Narcolepsy. This is from last Friday. It says, Minister of Health and Social Services, Paul Riskico, says it is essential to thoroughly examine suspicions that increased outbreaks of child narcolepsy might be linked to the H1N1 swine flu vaccine. However, the minister said the swine flu vaccination program would continue. In her view, Risco thought it would be wise to examine any connection between narcolepsy and swine flu vaccines in other European countries. The National Institute for Health and Welfare is to determine if the vaccine for the H1N1 swine flu could be linked to an increase in case of narcolepsy among children. The condition causes excess daytime sleepiness, even after adequate nocturnal sleep. Says experts on both vaccines and narcolepsy met on Wednesday to discuss the issue. Said doubts arose when a Finnish child neurologist noticed an increased level in the number of narcolepsy cases this year. Similar observations have been noticed in Sweden. And the same thing happened in Finland when a bunch of children fell ill with narcolepsy during or after last year's winter's swine flu epidemic, far more than the average rate, and they're trying to figure out whether it was related to the H1N1 vaccine or the flu itself. This next article from the Register.com says city receives citation for not fluoridating water. It says the city of Watsonville has been cited by the California Department of Public Health for failure to comply with an order by the state to fluoridate the water supply. The citation was received by the city Thursday and demands written assurance from the city by August 29th that it will comply and plan and schedule for the poisoning of the water supply by September 19th. City Attorney Al Smith said the citation appeared, quote, out of the clear blue. He said, we've been in communication with the Department of Health and Human Services. I was surprised. And he says fluoridation has been an issue ever since the City Council first passed a resolution accepting a grant to fluoridate. In February 2002, Fluoridation 2010 work group offered the city almost $1 million to fluoridate. Wow. But in November of that year, Watsonville residents concerned about the safety of fluoridation passed Measure 5, banning all substances from the water not specifically approved by the FDA, which includes fluoride. But by state law, it requires cities to fluoridate even, or if given the funding to do so. And see, that's philanthropy. And it says, and Watsonville lost its battle in court to honor the voters' wishes. However, that case was decided years ago in the city of California. Dental Association Foundation had been wrangling over a contract ever since, as the city tries to make certain the project will cost it nothing. It says, of specific concern are lawsuits associated with the project. This next article is from the Portland Press Herald, and it's titled, Is Engineered Frankenfish Coming to the Nation's Table? A Massachusetts company is awaiting FDA approval for its genetically engineered salmon. We all know, or if you don't know, in the UK they had not milk, they thought it was milk, but it was cloned meat that was confirmed. It's been confirmed that it was released into the food supply by some farmers. So it's out there, and in the U.S. I would assume that at least 60-70% of the food is GMO, and there's good possibility that a lot of the meat that we're eating is even could be cloned. Not a lot of it or most of it, but that there is at least some quantity of cloned meat out there here in the United States as well. It says, with a global population pressing against food supplies and vast areas of the ocean swept clean of fish, tiny AquaBounty Technologies say it can help free the world. The firm has developed genetically engineered salmon that reached the market weight in half the usual time. What's more is it hopes to avoid the pollution, disease, and other problems associated with saltwater fish farms by having its salmon raised in inland facilities. That's real natural. The FDA has yet to approve what would be the nation's first commercially genetically modified food. And, I listen to Alan Watt a lot, and he talks about synthetic foods, and this is basically what the elites had planned for us and for our little scientifically engineered society, which is to have most of our foods to be processed and synthetic. And this is just one aspect of it. And, of course, they'll use the guise of what? Of overpopulation and the environment to do it. So we're not surprised when we see rhetoric and propaganda like this. Artificial meat made in a giant vat could solve global food shortage. Artificial meat made in a giant vat could be the best solution to the problems of feeding the world's growing population. And it says over 9 billion people are expected to inhabit the planet by 2050, and the challenge of providing them with enough food to live without destroying the environment is increasingly tough. And see, I don't know, man. I don't know if we'll hit 9 billion. I still think that we have enough food and resources to feed the entire planet now, or if we have 9 billion people. I just believe that the resources are not being allocated efficiently, purposefully. And so I don't think that we're going to hit 9 billion. If we do, like I said, I think that we do have the resources. They're just not allocating efficiently. They're doing this on purpose, and I believe that the number will actually drop due to the eugenics, due to the hardcore eugenics that they're carrying out on us as of right now. Because unless you have a decent amount of money, there's really no way to really avoid it. Oh my God, this one, genes may overpower diet in Battle of the Bulge. This is another form of eugenics, like I said, where they mess with your DNA. Because these aren't, eugenics is, what is it? Is messing with genes, messing with your genes. So part of this social engineering is making it so that you physically, your DNA is just becoming more messed up and more weak. And you're just a fat, slovenous slob, as they call it, a pleb. So in summary, what they're saying in this article, I recommend you go to the link and check it out. But that basically, yeah, it doesn't matter how much you really cut back on your food. If your genes say, hey, you're going to be fat, well, you're going to be fat. And see, that's what the elites like. It's called the GMO gut. Straw theft is omen for future of food. Please check this out. It says mining giant BHP Billiton has made its bid for a Canadian group of potash core Saskatchewan because it sees a bright future for agricultural commodities. And it says demand for potash will increase as the global population grows and prices are likely to move higher. This means grain prices are likely to rise too. So this is bad news for farmers. This next one, India tries using cash bonuses to slow birth rates. Toxic legacy of U.S. assault on Fallujah worse than Hiroshima. The shocking rates of infant mortality and cancer in Iraq cities raises new questions. FDA uses massive egg recall to push for egg pasteurization. FDA found only 2 egg farms show salmonella. Thank you for joining me, everyone.